Welcome to the Lower Richland Heritage and Genealogy meeting for Sunday, April 18th. And we would like to welcome Meeghan Kane as our speaker, and Marie Adams will tell you more about her. Marie?
I'm ready. Yes, hello everyone. It is my pleasure and an honor to introduce our speaker for our April program. Meeghan Kane teaches history at Benedict College, which is my alma mater, where her focus is African American history and the history of youth movements in the 20th century. You can find more information in Making History at Benedict on Instagram. She was also editor of Unsweetened magazine, an online publication for feminist voices in the South, and she has served as president of Deckle Edge Literary Festival, a festival devoted to Southern storytellers who challenge the status quo. She is currently secretary of the Women and Gender Studies Partnership Council here in Columbia. And here to tell us more about the historical significance of Benedict College is Meeghan Kane.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm excited to share what I've discovered about the history of Benedict College during my time there. I look forward to all of your questions as well. I particularly look forward to learning a lot more about Benedict from you as well. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. It looks like the host has disabled participant screen sharing. I'm wondering if that can be changed. I should have done a test run of that. Here we go. Okay, it has a brief history of Benedict College. I say brief, but I've tried to include as many photographs as I possibly could so that you could see so much of what I've seen. Okay, starting with the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. As African Americans convened in Charleston after the Civil War was over, education was a priority. So as early as 1865, leaders convened to discuss what the future of freed people's education in South Carolina would look like. And it was resolved that education, building schools in all communities in South Carolina would be a priority. So education for freed people in Reconstruction era South Carolina, education began in a few different ways, but it was always a priority, right, for free people in South Carolina who sent their children out of the state in order to get educations prior to the Civil War. But after the Civil War, education will take different forms created by the Freedmen's Bureau, in informal and formal gatherings convened by missionaries. But from the beginning, there were a few schools that were created. Penn School in 1862, before the war was over, Avery Normal Institute, grooming teachers in 1865, the Mather School in 1868, Howard School here in Columbia, South Carolina in 1869, Claflin in 1869, Benedict Institute in 1870, and Allen University, which begins in Greenwood, but by 1880 it is also here in Columbia, South Carolina. Just to give you a little background on some of the forces that are bringing Benedict Institute to Columbia. The American Baptist Home Missionary Society was established in 1832 in New York City. They focused on Christian missions abroad, but also on the Western frontier. Their focus in the decades leading up to the Civil War was abolitionism. And they worked with the Freedmen's Bureau to bring education to freed people in various southern states. They had a Freedmen's Fund which was dedicated to the education of, quote, teachers and preachers. And Benedict Institute was one of 7 colleges, or I should say schools, that were created in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. That was the Culver Institute in Richmond, Wayland Seminary in DC. Those 2 were later brought together to form Virginia Union. Benedict Institute, of course, in Columbia, Nashville Institute, now Lemoyne-Owen, Shaw, Augusta Institute, now Morehouse, and Leland University of New Orleans. So Benedict College was one of a few Baptist institutions that were created in the first decade. Now, this is a city map of Columbia in 1872. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but you can see the State House here between Gervais and Senate. And then, of course, you have the Horseshoe that was the home of South Carolina College, now University of South Carolina. And then the very top right-hand corner, this is Benedict Institute. So right up here at the kind of furthest reaches of the city of Columbia. Benedict Institute was founded in 1870, and it was founded through the generous donation of Bathsheba Benedict of the American Baptist Home Missionary Society. She dedicated the school to her husband, Stephen Benedict, and named the first building after her husband as well. The building itself was an abandoned plantation house that had been built in 1839, and all the first classes for the Benedict Institute are conducted here under the leadership of Principal Timothy Dodge and assistant teacher Miss Mary Wooster. I have a list of the early presidents here, a few of the early presidents. These were all white presidents. They were all hired, they were all from the North. They were all hired by American Baptist Home Missionary Society, and they followed as such. So there was President Lewis Colby, who took over in 1876. There was President E.J. Goodspeed in 1879. And then there's the most controversial of these, Charles E. Becker, who took over in 1882. Now, throughout the 1870s and 1880s, there was some, well, I should say there was a focus on a Christian education. And to that end, there were some austere rules that I'll talk about in just a second. But also there was some pushback of the overwhelmingly white leadership that was at the helm of Benedict Institute from the very beginning. So as the South Carolina Colored Baptist Convention convened each year and convened at Benedict by the 1880s, there was a lot of focus on pushing for African-American faculty. And then, of course, going into the turn of the century, into the 20th century, there was a kind of loud push for Black leadership at Benedict. When Charles Becker takes over in 1882, he expands the campus. He also puts an emphasis on taking the kind of a more formal approach to education at Benedict, wanting to open up the college to bachelor's degrees. And eventually, by 1894, there is a charter that creates, from Benedict Institute to Benedict College and the awarding of college degrees. Although for years, Benedict Institute, later Benedict College, is really focused on creating teachers, also creating ministers, Baptist ministers, to go out throughout the state, but also throughout the South. And there's also, in some of these early newsletters that folks like Timothy Dodge, the principal, and then later the other presidents have to, when their Baptist conventions convene, or when the American Baptist Home Missionary Society convenes, all the presidents and the principals from the various schools can line up and talk about how much money they're bringing in, reporting on the success of the institution in general. And over again, they talk about this need, particularly in South Carolina, for political leaders within the communities. And so Benedict College has to compete with this need for political leadership in various communities throughout South Carolina. And there is, Timothy Dodge complains that it's hard to compete against that, keeping people in school on Benedict's campus when Darlington County needs a new sheriff. There's a school in the upcountry that needs more teachers. And so Benedict College, even by the time it's offering these college degrees, there is an immediate need for educated students to just hit the ground running and start nurturing their communities. During Becker's tenure, the campus itself is built. This is in part through selling some of the land while Becker is president. Benedict College goes from 80 acres to 20 acres. So 60,000 acres are sold while Becker is president. But he uses that money to build the campus. And Bathsheba Benedict also continues to contribute generously to the campus. So this is College Hall. And here's a later photograph of College Hall. This is Colby Hall, and I should add that College Hall was the boys' dormitory, and it was also the chapel for the campus. This is Colby Hall, which was the women's dormitory. It's also where they met for their Bible meetings every morning. This was the dining hall on campus. These were the stables. And this, of course, was Morgan Hall, which is currently the oldest building on campus. It was built in 1895. And I want to, a quick anecdote about Morgan Hall as well. Morgan Hall was built in 1895 because in 1893, the original plantation mansion that was built in 1839 burns down. Now, earlier in 1893, there was a report that the woods behind Benedict had been set on fire. And leading up to the burning of Benedict, the kind of main Benedict building, there had been, knocks on the back of the door. This is where the president and also the faculty were living at the time. And then on an October night, they smelled kerosene. Someone knocked on the back door and they went down, and the whole back building or back wall of the building was in flames. Now this is of course under Becker's tenure, and there's a lot of back and forth about why that fire was set and who set that fire. But this is also leading up to the 1895 Constitution and the kind of rise of racial violence in South Carolina. So other campuses, other HBCU campuses are also facing racial violence around the same time. But here at Benedict, it also leads to the end of Becker's tenure, who is accused of being insensitive, but also blatantly racist when it comes to the education of African-American students. Here is an example of one of the catalogs. It talks about the racial. I know it's probably a little blurry to you, but I want to go to the next page. The catalog is outlining the mission of the college, what's expected, but it also is really clear about how there's not going to be any dancing, there's not going to be any sports, there's no cussing, there's no smoking, and there's certainly no drinking on Benedict College's campus. But sports in particular, a most wicked waste is the waste of time. And so no sports were to be indulged on campus. The next really era of Benedict College is its prominence as a college in South Carolina for African Americans. So Benedict Institute is renamed Benedict College in 1890, but it's chartered as a college by the state in 1894. And by 1895, Abraham Osborne takes over as president, and then by 1911, Byron Valentine. So I'm going to show you a few photos of life on campus during this time. And the campus grows, enrollment expands, and the college itself starts to really define its character as a place where students are able to be trained in mechanical arts, in carpentry, in midwifery, but also as nurses. And that's in addition to the classical arts curriculum that's being developed as well. I should say the classical arts and also the sciences. So the faculty, by the 1890s, the faculty has been integrated. This is the theological faculty. On the far right is the president at the time, Abraham Osborne. This is a long shot of the campus. This is probably approximately where the entrance to the campus today is from Hardin Street. So on the left, you see College Hall, you see the cupola for College Hall. You can barely make out all the way across the campus. You can see what was then, what would be the Carnegie Library that was built in 1903. And then way off in the distance is Colby Hall. Here's an image of a kind of straight ahead shot of Morgan Hall. By the turn of the century, another building is added for dorms and instruction, and this is Convention Hall. And in 1902, Pratt Institute is built. The Pratt building still stands on the campus today too. It's the second oldest building on campus. And Pratt was the home of the Nursing Training Center, founded by Matilda Arabella Adam, excuse me, Matilda Evans, whose home is still standing across the street from Benedict, behind the Jamaican restaurant. She was the first Black woman doctor in South Carolina, and her focus was obstetrics and gynecology. And she was a real force for education in the community, but also for African-American health in Columbia. Here are nurses that were training at the center. This was the hospital that was built in 1914. Here are a group of nurses standing in front of the hospital. The faculty, again, by the turn of the century, the faculty is still predominantly white, but it is integrated. And here are some images, again, of student life. So this is a shot from within a classroom that was either, so above the dining hall were classrooms, and also in the convention hall were classrooms. Here's a science classroom. Here's the printing press that was in Benedict College. The South Carolina Black Baptist Convention put out a newsletter, and that newsletter was printed at Benedict College, and that would have been printed by these men here. This is the Benedict Band in 1910. They're standing in front of Convention Hall. You can just make it out in the background. This is an example of a student's dorm in 1910. You can see the pictures from home, sitting next to the mirror. And this is the dining hall. One of my favorite photographs of the bunch, because you can also see, I mean, just the normal day-to-day things that need to be done and need to be taken care of are so evident here. Windows and shades, the light bulbs are dropping from the ceiling, and just, you know, the kind of hustle and bustle of students convening to have their meal together. Now, this is a photograph of the chapel that would have been in College Hall at the time. Now, imagine this hall, imagine filled to the brim, imagine all, you know, kind of standing room only. And you would be imagining the 1907 speech that was delivered by W.B. Du Bois you know, for the Frederick Douglass Debating Club. So this is early. This is, he's currently in 1907, he's a professor at Atlanta University, and he's come to Benedict College because, again, Benedict College is expanding. And on a tour, and at the time he would have been one of the leaders of the Niagara movement. This is still 2 years before the NAACP has been created. And he comes to Benedict to talk about the future of civil rights and also the historic precedents, you know, prior to it. And he talks a bit about Abraham Lincoln and the moral cause of emancipation. This is an image of the graduating class. This would have been in 1917. And this is a panoramic view, and to get a sense of what the campus would have looked like at the time. And I also have a Sanborn map that I'm going to show you in just a moment. So this is, behind this group of students is Convention Hall. This, behind these group of students, is College Hall. And also, it's kind of worth noting that Majeska Simpkins is probably in here somewhere. The Benedict College, throughout its early years, well into the 1920s, it serves as both a primary school and also after 1895 as a college. So the Howard School was overflowing with students, and even after Booker T. Washington is built in 1916, there are more students. The demand for primary education is more than both those institutions can manage, and so Benedict College also has a primary school on campus. And Majeska Simpkins would have been, famous activist, notable activist. Majeska Simpkins would have been a student at this time. At the very right, or excuse me, at the top of the left-hand corner of the screen, you can see the Carnegie Library. A little bit more about the Carnegie Library that's important to note is that this was not just a library for Benedict College. This is the library for African Americans in Columbia during this time. I mean, and even more importantly, the Benedict College campus was an important place for celebrations on the community level. Emancipation Day was celebrated here. In 1919, when World War I soldiers returned, is at Benedict College where the parade ends and the speeches are given, demanding equal rights. Behind, kind of in the center of the screen, this would have been, this would have been the hospital. Oh, shoot. And then Colby Hall is right behind these students on the left, and of course Pratt on the right. This is a famous photo that gets a lot of traffic on the internet, so I thought I would include it here. After explaining where some of these other buildings are and what they are, you can have a little bit more perspective. And of course, these cars take us to the late teens, early 1920s. This is what the layout of Benedict was in 1919. So the entrance to the school would have been, there's two primary entrances, but the main entrance is over here on Hardin Street. And coming onto campus, you'd have had these, the instructional buildings, the dormitories for the men, the library, the president's house, which was Morgan Hall today, kind of coming around to Colby, and then Pratt was off in the distance. And the rest was kind of a wooded area. And then behind the furthest building would be the stables, and then a dining hall, and a domestic science building, and then the laundry. Now, Benedict College by the teens, so 1907, they have their first baseball team. By the 19-teens, they're gonna have a football team. So they loosen up about sports by the turn of the century. And here are a few images from these early sports teams. Now, they weren't the Tigers yet. They were the Deacons well into the 1930s. Here's the football team. Now, when President Clarence Tisdale takes over in 1922, he has big hopes for the college. Now, what we know, and what maybe Tisdale didn't know at the time, was he's also going to be the last white president of Benedict College. He's the last American Missionary Society president. And when he takes the helm, he gives us this really weirdly futuristic speech that's interesting to note. So we will expect that students will be coming to this school from all over this and other states in flying machines, and that the professor of astronomy will take his class up in one of the big air chariots for a little outing around the moon. The professor who lives in New York will hear the daily recitation of students while he is at home with full vision of the class assembled. And the class will have full view of the professor, giving him answers and asking him questions. That was my fall 2020 semester, right? When Benedict plays ball at Orangeburg, licking either Claflin or State College, every student and teacher can remain in his room, press a button and see the game and hear the big umpire when he cried out for our gallant boys making a home run safe. 50 years from now, we expect to see Colby Hall displaced by a 20-story stone building for the girls' dormitory. And for those of you who know, Mather Hall isn't 20 stories, but eventually Mather Hall is built to be the dorm for women students. And this vision is pretty prescient. But Antistel goes about building the school, attempting to expand physical plants. So what is now called Duckett Hall, which was the science building when it was built in 1925, is an addition that Antistel makes to the campus. But really, in the 1920s, the campus expands. And it is also worth noting that college life develops during the 1920s in ways that it has not. And this isn't just specific to Benedict College. College life on campuses all over the United States, but also on HBCU campuses. Ella Baker, activist Ella Baker, later writes in an interview, she talks about Shaw University and discusses how popular culture becomes an important part of going to college, but also rebelling against some of the more strict parts of the institution become a regular part of student life. Students start protesting about things they don't agree with, and they also start demanding changes. So throughout the 1920s on HBCU campuses, students are demanding African-American faculty, and they're also demanding a Black president. These are the Carr sisters. I should also note that the photographs that you see here are a combination of photographs that I have borrowed from the University of South Carolina, and most of those are Richard Samuel Roberts photographs, like this one of the Carr sisters, all three of whom attended Benedict College in different capacities. Two graduated from the college with BAs, one attended the primary school. And then other photographs like this one I have collected from the Benedict College archives, from the yearbooks, and also some of the photographs from the college catalog, and just mining all of those papers and documents and photographs. And a lot of the work that we did for the 150th anniversary was uncovering some of the treasures that I'm sharing with you today. Now, by 1930, the demands of Benedict College students, and also the broader Benedict College community, and Columbia and South Carolina African-American Baptists, really comes to fruition, or those demands, I should say, are met when J.J. Starks takes over the presidency of Benedict College in 1930. And he had been president of Morris College, which was founded in 1908, as founded through the South Carolina African-American Baptist Convention. I mean, Black Baptists created Morris College as a college for and by African Americans in South Carolina, and Benedict, and also in direct competition with Benedict College. So when J.J. Starks takes over at Benedict College, it's decided, and it's there's a negotiation where Benedict becomes the only four-year Baptist college for African American South Carolinians for the time being. His wife, Julia Starks, is beloved on campus, and she really becomes both a mentor to students, male and female, and also a campus mother. As soon as President Starks takes over, he begins to expand. So he begins building Antistel Chapel in in 1931, and by 1932 it is complete. So this is the first commencement. These are images from the first commencement that was held at the Antistal Chapel. And in 1933. I know this image is washed out, but it is a remarkable image because it's taken within the chapel during the commencement. And so this is a view from the pews. This is the first class to graduate in Antistal Chapel. I included this also. Osborne Hall is a college hall, the cupola is removed, and there's this constant need, of course, to update these buildings. Sometimes their names get changed. College Hall becomes Osborne Hall, and it becomes solely a dormitory because now they have this brand new beautiful chapel that is in Tisdale. Stark's Library is going to replace the Carnegie Library. The Carnegie Library becomes administrative building. The Deacons become the Tigers. As far as we know, this is the first image of the Tigers. These are a few football players from the 1930s. Pretty certain that it was the 1931 football team. Also football players from the 1930s. And here's an action shot from the 1930s. Somebody's not wearing their helmet. Now, Stark's Library was built in 1937, and 2 years later, under the urging and leadership of activists NAACP activists in South Carolina, and also with, of course, the help of Jessica Simpkins, the South Carolina branch conference is created for the NAACP, and it brings together all the branches of the NAACP. And that happens on Benedict's campus at this brand new library that was the Stark's Library. Septima Clark graduates from Benedict in 1942. I have a few images of Septima Clark. And in 1944, John Alvin Baycoats takes the helm of the college. He's going to oversee the largest, up until this point, enrollment increase in the post-World War II years. And he's also going to oversee the civil rights movement. And in some ways that's controversial because while President Baycoats was a supporter of civil rights and wanted to see change happen, he was also a college president. And most college presidents, even of these HBCUs, took the safety of students really seriously, and were in general, especially in these early years, dissuaded students from participating in nonviolent disobedience that would have had them arrested. He also is going to still build a new gym. Some of these early photographs have Benedict College practicing in Allen's gym. So a gym is created. The Antisdale Bowl is developed where these football matches happen. And I know that I'm running over, so I'll pick it up a little bit. This is, the basketball team is established in 1938. This is the women's basketball team. Here's the women's basketball team. This is a game that's happening in Allen. Here's the 1948 football team. Here's 1949 cheerleaders. Here's 1946 cheerleaders in the homecoming parade. This is the freshman class in 1946. You can see in the very back there, the bobby socks and the penny loafers. Here are the campus queens of 1948. Freshman class of 1948. And here's, just to give you an update on what the campus looks like by the late 1940s, early 1950s. You've got really prominent here is Duckett Hall. You can see the Antisdale Bowl, the new gym. You can also see Convention Hall is still there. Osborne Hall, the Stark's Library, and then also in Tisdale Chapel. Now, it's important to also note that the civil rights movement gets an early start here in South Carolina, particularly with the leadership of so many dedicated activists, including Jessica Simpkins, who helped put together the 7th annual meeting of the Southern Negro Youth Congress that meets here in 1946. So Paul Robeson is here, and students from all over the South and all over the country come to Columbia to talk about the civil rights issues of the day. Now, this is from within the Township Auditorium, but at Tisdale Chapel, W.B. Du Bois gives his famous Behold the Land speech. A few short years later, Jessica Simpkins is also involved in the drafting of Briggs v. Elliott, which becomes a part of the 5 cases that eventually end or begin the mandate to end school desegregation in Brown v. Board. Benedict and Allen students throughout the 1960s participate in sit-ins, marches, protests at the State House grounds. And in many ways, are part of landmark civil rights cases that go to the Supreme Court. But yet South Carolina is left out of that narrative in so many ways. But also throughout the 1960s, of course, campus life continues. These are the campus queens from 1961, cheerleaders, early 60s, baseball team, the basketball team. Here's the football team at Tisdale Bowl. And this takes us up to 1965, when Benjamin F. Payton takes over the presidency. At 34, Dr. Payton was the youngest president of Benedict College. He was also the first to hold a PhD. And he really, in many ways, even though he's only president from he officially takes over in 1968 to 1972, he oversees the transformation of Benedict College, new buildings on campus. He modernizes the campus, but he also brings African-American studies and includes civil rights and Black studies in the curriculum, kind of campus-wide curriculum is to include African-American studies. He's also going to bring Pauli Murray, who was one of the great legal minds of the 20th century, to campus, who she briefly serves as one of his vice presidents. But during their tenure, Payton is also going to be instrumental in bringing Benedict to the forefront of city politics as well, and including Benedict students in the conversation about equality and municipal government. Those of you who know, these are a few of the buildings that are created in the early 1970s. Mather Hall, 1970. Of course, the Learning Resources Center. You can see in the reflection there, the reflection of in Tisdale Chapel. Payton was also, he brought to campus a lot of speakers. I mean, Stokely Carmichael comes, Gordon Park comes, Muhammad Ali comes to campus, Coretta Scott King comes to campus. He invites legendary civil rights figures to come to campus and speak to students, but he also gives students the space to process the civil rights movement and racial violence that is happening in America at the time. And this is a protest that Benedict students and also Allen students attended in solidarity with Claflin and South Carolina State students in the wake of the Orangeburg Massacre. And then, of course, college life again continues with campus queens, sports, fraternities and sororities, and also just campus life, students having conversation about the world, but always keeping their eyes on the prize. Thank you.
That was amazing.
Let's say thank you, Meg. And open for questions, comments.
Well, that was amazing. I learned a lot, and I didn't know about the library as a Carnegie Library. I know a little bit about the history of the Carnegie libraries across the country, but I wanted to know, and maybe I didn't hear this, but is the Carnegie Library building still on the campus, or the building that replaced the Carnegie Library? What was that?
I think someone's mic slipped.
Okay.
And this is what I guess I didn't mention. I have one photograph that at the very last minute I couldn't find, and it's a great transitional photograph that shows the Bay Coats building, that shows the new dorms that were being built, including Goodson, and the old buildings, right? The Convention Hall and the and Osborne Hall, and all of those buildings, Convention Hall, College Hall, later Osborne Hall, the Carnegie building, the dining hall, all of that is demolished to make way for the new library, and also the new gym that's erected, which is bigger than the gym that was built in the late 40s. And then also, of course, Mather Hall, which really takes center stage.
And I was amazed at the Antistal field. And so I guess, was that property sold or something? And then
we still have it. It's smaller now because the physical plant and the parking garage was built over part of it. But we still have a smaller version of it that's right next to the current gym.
okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask too, if you found any evidence of where the boundaries of the original 80 acres were. Because if I'm entering the campus through the main gate, I'm thinking it's to the left, down past Allen and Benedict Court. Would I be correct in that direction?
That's my idea too. I don't have the original. So the next kind of stage of my research is going into the original parameters of the plantation and kind of who that was and when he left, because that person isn't there. My guess is that it's 18, leading into the Civil War, the whole plantation is abandoned. But I've also heard that from just other people who've done, some other research that perhaps that plantation had been abandoned longer than that. So understanding kind of what those original boundaries were, because Benedict College in the late 19th century, in the 1880s and 1890s, is also using some of Bathsheba Benedict's money to buy other lands for their horticultural efforts too. So they have a farm on campus that everybody has to work. And if you are found doing things you shouldn't be doing, you work on the farm extra. So, there is a farm that students are raising their own food and taking care of animals as part of keeping the campus going too. So they sell 60 acres, but they also buy other property along the way. But that's definitely something that I want to find out, what the original boundaries were. That's great.
Yeah.
And do you know who the plantation originally was owned by?
It was owned by a man named Taylor, but it's not the Taylor. But I don't know if it's if there is a connection between this Taylor and the Taylor family. So that's another question that I still need to answer.
We'll need to talk.
Yeah.
She said the magic word, Taylor.
Because it could be.
Yeah. Well, something else that could be a connection. When Dr. Mariana Davis did the history of Benedict College, she identified Bathsheba, a Barber Benedict, as the founder. So I was wondering if in your research you found any information about her Barber family.
I didn't, but it's interesting. And one of the things that I want to do a lot more digging when it comes to the presidents, but also some of the faculty that came down here, because in so many ways, this is an extension of, for them, it's an extension of the abolitionist movement, right? I mean, the Civil War is just a blip on their radar of just this kind of broader missionary vision that they see. And this is also kind of why there's pushback against that, right? I mean, at some point people are like, we're not your cause anymore. But the Barber connection, I'm wondering about, because Rhode Island, where Bathsheba Benedict is from, also has a long-term the Rhode Island connection is there between South Carolina and Rhode Island. So I'm wondering if that is maybe a part of that. But it's also, I'm so sorry, you guys have great questions and I don't have good answers. It's something that I still need to research.
Okay, great. I understand completely.
Any other
Hello?
questions?
Yes. I have a question. I was really surprised to learn about Benedict's nursing program. Do they still have that nursing program, or is it with someone else they can get a degree through Benedict?
Well, no, there's not a nursing program at Benedict right now, and students ask for it on a pretty regular basis, but currently there's no process even to be enrolled with Benedict and have some sort of dual enrollment for a nursing degree. I do not know when the nursing program ended, though. My guess is that it was in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when there were a lot of changes going on just in general. And a nursing program is one of those programs that would have been really expensive to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I should ask you, do you remember a nursing program when you were on campus? Ms. Adams?
No, not in 66. And I think it was in 1967 that they brought in the social work program. So that might have replaced, the nursing program. And it was Dr. Payton at that time who brought that program in, the social work. In fact, my sister Jean, who is supposed to be signing into this meeting today, received her degree in social work. She was in that class of first degrees with social work as the major. Yeah.
Wow,
And
that's.
in fact, Dr. Payton and I can't remember the lady who's over the program, but they enabled a group of students from Benedict to go to a master's program at Smith College in I can't remember the location, but anyway, the prestigious Smith College.
Massachusetts?
Yeah, in Massachusetts, and that's where they got their master's in social work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any early connection or 60s connection with the Penn Center? I think that's what it's called, down in Huntington Island, between, as far as gathering faculty, sharing faculty transfers back and forth?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead. You go ahead. I know.
No, I
Dr.
was
Davis,
just going to say there was a partnership with the Mather School, but not that I know of with Penn.
yes, the Mather. So in the Mather School too, when the Mather School closes down, this is, some of that money, of course, goes to building Mather Hall. But there is, Dr. Davis writes about the kind of educational resource sharing that was happening with Penn Center, especially as they became recognized as a National Historic Site, but I don't know the details of that.
Do we have any other questions from anyone or comments?
I think you had something in the feed. I see 3.
in the chat box.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, a comment. This was awesome.
thank you.
Very, very good. And again, we will not be meeting in June because that is Father's Day, but we are under the Serco banner, and Marie will tell you more about
The June event. Yeah.
the June event, which is Juneteenth. And Meeghan, thank you so much for participating. Thank you for presenting. Very well received. And I look forward to talking to you about that land around the Taylors.
I just really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. And I hope that we can connect and maybe work together with student projects in the future.
Yeah, and we got to talk to Graham also.
Yes, yes.
Is Graham
yes.
watching?
He is on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here.
Hey, Graham.
Hi, Graham.
Hey.
Okay, and with that, I'll go ahead and also make the comment that Benedict College, along with the Harriet Barber House and a couple of other historic locations in Richland County, are now part of the new Reconstruction Era National Network, National Historic Network. And so that, we hope, will be an opportunity to work together again for some upcoming projects. Our big project that's coming up in June, which we hope all of you will participate in, is Juneteenth. And I want to begin by saying Juneteenth in Hopkins is going to be historic. Serco is presenting a Juneteenth celebration that will be Saturday, June the 19th, and it will start around 12 noon from 5 p.m. on the grounds of the historic Harriet Barber House in Hopkins. And we're extending an invitation to all of you to join us. And in addition to stage entertainment with national gospel recording artist John P. Key, and other local groups, we will offer both family history displays, tours, an arts camp for youth. There'll be food vendors, of course, non-food vendors, nonprofits will be displaying information about their projects. And of course, we want to remind our guests that you'll be able to view the stage entertainment from your car if you choose, or you can bring your own chair, but we are asking that you still wear masks to this event. But you'll be able to get around and again be reminded to be socially distant. And as an opening to this celebration on Saturday, we're also planning a Juneteenth symposium. It'll be led by Dr. Crystal Eddins of the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Registration will probably open the 1st of June, so look for information about how you can sign up for that presentation. She'll be talking about the Reconstruction era and other topics, including reparations. And we hope to see all of you there.
And what time will it begin?
I mentioned the Saturday event will begin at 12, and we think things will wrap up around 5. But as far as the symposium, you'll have to wait until that information is posted around the 1st of June.
Okay.
So the start time this early.
Okay, and we'll post that on our web.
Right, it'll be on, yeah, the Lower Richland Heritage and Genealogy Facebook page, as well as Serco and the Harriet Barber House pages. Then, and again, that's June 18th as the opener, and then Saturday, June 19th.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Any more comments, questions before we go?
I see a couple more comments. Says that this is wonderful. Thank you. And this is very informative. And thank you, Meeghan. I enjoyed every minute of it. I sent a couple of screenshots to my daughter and my husband while we were in. So very good information. And so I can't wait to share the video afterwards. So.
Oh, yes.
And the video will be on our Facebook page along with our YouTube page, correct, Deidre?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'll since I have everybody's emails, I will email you a link to it as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday and have a great week. Be safe.
Thank you. And Meeghan, we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. It was so nice to meet you all too. Thank you so
Nice to
much.
meet you too. Okay.
Thank you.